So I've got all my animations set up now. I've got my shader and my lighting done for my text. So basically all I need to do now is figure out what I want to do with my rendering with my camera. And there's a couple other things I want to do as well. I want to make sure that this is set up so that I can composite it and do whatever I want to with After Effects. So if I just jump into my camera for a second. So what I want is the flexibility to be able to change the background and do whatever I want in my compositing. And what I do know I've got is shadows on my floor here. And I know I've got a physical sky here which is lighting my scene, but I might want to change the actual background itself. So how do we do that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the physical sky basically invisible. It's still going to illuminate the scene, but it's going to be invisible. And I'm going to create a shadow catcher on the floor which will catch all the shadows from these clones so that we can composite them with a different background in After Effects. So let's start with this floor. That's really easy to do. If we go to the Create menu down in our materials, under the materials we can just create a new shadow catcher material. And all we need to do with this is drag and drop it onto the floor, and that's it. You'll see that the floor's turned black. So basically the floor's going to be invisible, but in our transparency channel in our images when we render this, we will have the shadows visible in the transparency so we can composite them over the top of another background. So that's the floor taken care of. For the rendered physical sky, to hide that from the render, I can go to the physical sky itself. Under the tags menu, I can go to render tags, and I can add what's called a compositing tag. This gives us the ability to separate a lot of the elements in our scene when it comes to rendering so that we have more control over them in compositing. And in this compositing tag, I'm going to turn off scene by camera. What that means is this object, this physical sky, is no longer seen by the camera. It still creates the lighting, but we don't see it in the camera. So if I'm to do a test render right here, what we should see is our clones and pretty much a black background and a black floor. Yep, so we've got a black background. And yep, the floor is black as well. Now here's a really handy feature that you can use in the picture viewer when you're rendering. What we've done so far is looked at the history of images that we've test rendered, and we can click through those and see what's going on with them. When we have special effects going on with our render, things like this shadow catcher on the floor, and there's many other things we can do, we can actually look at those different render elements in our picture viewer. So rather than view the history of our renders that we've been testing, we can look at the different layers that we've got in our render. Now we've got two layers going on. We've got our background, which is our general animation, our general objects in the scene, and we've also got our transparency channel. I can look at each single pass or single layer. If I click the background, what I'm getting is basically my background graphics, all my elements. But if I click on the alpha, I can see that this is the transparency channel. And one thing you'll notice is there is actually the shadows on the objects marked out in the transparency channel. So obviously they're not visible on the floor itself because it's black, but they are visible in the transparency channel. So that means these areas where it's white will show up as black in our compositing program. So that's going to give us a lot of flexibility. So let's just go back to viewing our history there. So this is all set up and ready to render. The only thing I might want to do from here is to maybe set up a little bit of a camera move so it's a little bit more dynamic. And we've got all these really great clones lying clustered around on the floor now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the end of my animation and I'm going to decide where I want my camera to end. And what I'd quite like is it to be really sort of in amongst these clones that have flown all over the place and bounced and settled. So I'm going to sort of drive my camera around a little bit and just find a great spot where I've got some elements right in the foreground here. So I've got the sphere in the foreground. So that's looking pretty good. I quite like that position there. So I'm at the last frame of my sequence. I'm going to select my camera and hit the keyframe button. Now I'm going to go right back to the start and I'm going to reposition my camera. I'm in my camera. I'm just positioning it by using my option and my three mouse buttons to zoom around and pan and tumble and position it. And I'm going to shift it back a little bit. I'm going to keep it pretty much in the middle of my screen. I've got my mode text. Maybe I'll just lift it up a little bit. And we'll start with our camera there with the text pretty much in the middle. Maybe I'll just shift it down so it's not right in the middle. And if I'm happy with my camera position at frame 0, Let's make sure it's selected and hit the keyframe button. So now, if we just play through this, so now there's a little bit of a camera move going on. I'm just slowly moving in, and it's going to start all blowing apart here, which is really filling up my screen with lots of energy, lots of things happening, and there's all these things tumbling around in the foreground. These rolled past, that worked out really well. It wasn't planned, but that looks great. So I've just got a little bit of a camera move there, which gives it a little bit more of a dynamic, a bit more interesting. Now, obviously, there's a million things you could do. You can change the way your camera moves. You can change all the timing. You can do your own things with this, but I'm pretty happy with how this looks. So that's done. What I need to do now is set up a render sequence. I need to save my files, make sure that in my render settings, always make sure your alpha channel is turned on, so we've got the transparency channel. And so I'm going to render this sequence out and then put it into After Effects.